Hey, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. You can feel free to turn your cameras on. I will keep you guys on mute unless you have a question. But we are very excited to welcome Mike Gursha here today to speak with us about the value of entrepreneurial thinking and problem solving. He is a 2010 graduate of Whitman and Newhouse, Entrepreneurship and Television, Radio, and Film, and he is currently the CEO and chairman of Rookie Road. So I'm going to let Mike take over and talk to you guys. If you do have questions, you can feel free to ask them at any time. If you feel more comfortable, you can use the chat feature and I can read them if you'd like. So, all right, take it away, Mike.
Perfect. How's everyone doing this week so far? I hope everyone is having a good week and excited for the long weekend. I think I'll start and just give a quick overview and thank you for the quick intro, Allison. But I think I'll give a little bit more background on some of my experience just with startups and building companies and just my background in general, because I think that might put a light bulb in some topics or some questions that you might have over the course of this conversation. And then I'll go into talking a little bit about just entrepreneurship in general, building companies from the traditional sense of entrepreneurship, but also I think a topic that's very relevant now specifically is why entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial thinking and problem solving are really essential, for the environment that we're in now, but B, really in just any organization, whether you're starting your own company or not, why those skill sets and thinking that way is really important, whatever career path you decide to go down. And so high level, just, I'll start with my background. Like Allison said, I'm currently the chairman and CEO of Rookie Road. Rookie Road, in its quick definition, is kind of a one-stop shop, a one-of-a-kind digital destination that provides the rules, lingo, gameplay for a variety of sports. And really, we're trying to cover all sports around the world globally, and we're sort of on our way to doing that. And making it easy to understand content to help really learn a new sport from the ground up or answer really any question you might have about a sport. Think, what is icing in hockey or what is offsides in soccer or whatever it may be. Before that, I was actually the entrepreneur in residence up at Syracuse at Newhouse specifically, but working also very closely with Whitman while I was on campus, really working on entrepreneurship and innovation. So this is something I'm very used to having conversations about. And working on entrepreneurship and innovation, lecturing really across campus on the various different topics. And working, I also co-taught a class while I was up there called New Ventures in Media, which was really about, startups in the media space specifically. I'll keep going a little bit, but then I want to keep this short and then get into a little bit more of the topics. Prior to that, I worked at a biotechnology company, an early stage startup. At the time when I joined, it was based in New York, working on various different treatments for neurological diseases. I was one of the initial team members there, and was held various different positions, but most recently in the past, vice president of strategic initiatives there. And then, I've had various different other experiences through, internships, which I'm sure, are topics that you also might want to talk about a little bit. Internships at, Time Inc. And Time Warner and Google and a couple other, technology and media companies. So I also, graduate of SU, graduated from Newhouse and Whitman, loved both schools, had an amazing experience. I also stay very involved with both schools. And always really happy to help and hear from students like you. And so, jumping into a little bit around, entrepreneurship and startups, I've always naturally just gravitated towards entrepreneurship and startups, frankly, just because I like building things and creating things. And I think, really when it comes down to it, entrepreneurship is really about building and creating. And I think that's where, people get lost a little bit with entrepreneurship, as a kind of a scary word, for a lot of people, meaning like, you have to, to be an entrepreneur, you have to, start a company, and you have to build a company from scratch or whatever it may be. In the traditional sense, that might be true, but I think entrepreneurship is much broader than that from a topic and relevance perspective, especially in today's world, and especially around entrepreneurial thinking. And I think that's kind of the offshoot of the traditional, clear, narrow definition of entrepreneurship as a whole, is starting a business and building a company. And something I talked a lot about when I was the entrepreneur in residence up at Syracuse and at Newhouse was that this entrepreneurial thinking, kind of topic and offshoot sort of entrepreneurship is so important for people to think about and consider as they look at their career paths and really get kind of proficient in a way of thinking prior to starting your career. And I think that a lot of times that starts that thinking can start at during college or during your studies. And so when I think of entrepreneurial thinking, I think more of the specifics around entrepreneurship, kind of like what I was talking about. Like the core of it is building something or creating something. But I think from the standpoint of, in any role that you take on in any organization, whether it's a big public, company, or whether it's a, medium-sized org, or whether you're working for the government or whatever it may be, you're always going to have to take an idea or a concept and build upon it. And, put a plan together in terms of how you're going to execute on it, and ultimately work with and collaborate with people and problem solve to ultimately, take that idea or whatever concept you're working on and, push it, down the line to, get it to succeed or create something of substance that people are using or that's going to help people or whatever it may be. So that general process, I think, from, kind of idea to, finish line of like getting something actually used and created, by, kind of an end user of whatever sorts, can happen in any kind of organization. And frankly, that's what I kind of look at as entrepreneurship, is building, right, and creating. And so from that standpoint, that kind of thinking, making sure that you can kind of take an idea from the ground up and kind of build upon it and bring in, the appropriate people in all aspects, different skill sets, across the board, because you're not going to have every skill set to, make sure to, to get something done and to get it across the finish line by yourself. And so ultimately bringing the right people in, on board onto an idea, push it forward and create, real momentum and execution, and then kind of try and get it to the finish line and the final goal of where you want it, applies in any organization, kind of like what I was saying before. And so that kind of thinking is super important, just, no matter what career path you go down. The aspects that I think are really important from that standpoint in terms of, areas related to entrepreneurship that really come into play are sort of that, problem solving, creativity, creating new ideas, collaboration, finding people that think differently than you and have different kind of skill sets than you do. And bringing all that kind of stuff together to build something or create something new and then move it forward. And again, going back to the fact that like in any organization, no matter what, again, not traditional startups all the time, just when you're like building something from the ground up, from nothing. But even when you have something that you're already working with in a big company and you have a new idea that you want to build on top of it, it still requires the same process of thinking, of problem solving, of creativity, of bringing new ideas to the table, of finding the right people to bring in the right concepts to be able to build upon that concept or upon that idea or upon that, service or whatever you're trying to create. And so, you know, it's so important to have that kind of thinking, and train yourself to think that way, very early on in your career or in your life. I think there's a lot of ways to do that, especially, being a student and on campus. I think, making this kind of conversation relate a little bit more to where all of you are in your lives is, on campus, there's so many different opportunities, whether it's, obviously group projects that you have within, school in traditional sense to, build something, from scratch. But also just getting involved with things that kind of push you a little bit outside of your comfort zone and where you have to figure something out and problem solve something that you're not totally sure how to do. Um, and I think a lot of times, at least from my experiences specifically, but also from experiences of seeing other people do this, is putting yourselves in sort of uncomfortable situations or situations where you don't know the answer, can be relatively beneficial and actually very beneficial. It's a little scary sometimes to do that because there's a lot of unknowns with, not having all the answers. But a lot of, questions then come about, and you can ask questions, and then those questions lead to more questions, and then those questions lead to ideas, and those ideas lead to, collaboration and problem solving, and, bringing people together to kind of solve those problems. And so, I think the more you can put yourself, and again, specifically talking about this from a college perspective, but I think this applies in really any sense of life, earlier than college and or, even when you're in your career, putting yourselves in sort of those uncomfortable scenarios where you don't have all the answers, where you can learn a tremendous amount, is, really, really valuable training, even if you don't realize it when it's happening. Um, in terms of, the value of sort of problem solving in general, I think the more, again, sort of building upon that a little bit, the more you can put yourself in situations where you have to problem solve and think a little bit outside the box and push yourself, beyond what your norm is, the better off you'll be. And then, with that, a lot of times you surround yourself with people that are very different than you from the way that they think, in terms of, needing to come at a problem from different angles. And with that, from a collaboration perspective, whatever, again, it differs, depending on what you're working on. But a lot of times you need different thought processes, different expertise, different backgrounds. If you're building a company, you need, potentially a technology company. I'll talk to my specific, life. You need someone with an engineering background. You need someone with a business background. You need someone with a sales background. You need someone who, just generally has different aspects of the whole pie, that can each bring specific things to the table where you can learn from all the other people around you. So I think, again, there's so many opportunities on a college campus, given the fact that there's so many people studying different things, doing different things, so many professors that are different experts in different areas, so many different opportunities to mesh with different kinds of people, that it really is the ideal time to kind of, test and try new things that can build this kind of, skill set around entrepreneurial thinking and problem solving and creating and idea generation and all of that kind of stuff. And it really is the perfect environment to do it. And you get a lot of other different perspectives that open up your mind and open up your eyes just generally, which allow you to think about things in different ways as you continue to grow as a person, but then also grow professionally over time. I'll talk about one more thing and then I'll pause for some questions because I don't want to, keep just talking and bore everybody. But I think that, again, with these kind of skill sets, these are all skill sets that are so important to employers. And so from a job perspective specifically, right? Like I look for people for our organization, and I always have done this throughout my entire career, whatever position that I'm in. I look for people, obviously who have a specific skill set that can add value to a position. But there's a lot of people that can do that, right? Like there's a lot of people that might have Excel skills, or there's a lot of people that might have some sales experience, and there's a lot of people that might have XYZ, are good with people, right? And talking to people from say an investor relations standpoint or whatever it may be. The differentiator for me when I'm looking to hire somebody is really a lot of these core principles that I'm talking about now. Whether it is, can this person be in a situation where maybe they're talking to one of our investors and a problem comes up, right? Are they going to be able to solve it themselves? Or are they going to be stuck in a situation where they have no idea what to do? Is there a, opportunity from a sales perspective where somebody, is selling into a, customer potentially where, the customer says, I don't want to do this, but I want to do this, right? Are they just reading from the script of what, we gave them, or are they able to creatively on the spot, come up with a new concept and solve it and collaboratively solve it with that person? And, from that standpoint, a lot of that comes from just, trial and error over time of being in those situations and learning how to do that. And so, from my perspective, those are sort of the, most important skills that differentiate from a hiring perspective. And I think, that's generally the case whether you're an early stage company or not. I mean, any organization or any potential, hiring manager or person, that is looking for a particular person for a particular role wants to know that you can think creatively, you can problem solve, you can come up with new ideas. You're obviously going to know how to know how to collaborate with all different kinds of people. Those are really the things that are most important. And that are core. A lot of the things that go on top of that, like, the actual software that you might be using as a salesperson, or, the actual software modeling tools that you'd be using in, for financial modeling, or the research. I mean, you can always learn those things, and those are very structural things, right? So, the other stuff comes over long periods of time and is sort of, ingrained in you over learning, in many different scenarios. So that's why, in my opinion, again, despite, no matter what career you decide to go into or what path you decide to go down, and it's not, just narrowly focused on you want to go work for a startup or you want to start your own company. No matter what path you go down, these general concepts and skill sets are, probably some of, if not the most important things that you can kind of learn and, take into your career going forward. So I'll stop there for a minute. Hope that gives a little bit of an overview of, kind of at least how I think about this stuff. But I definitely want to, answer specific questions and/or, any thoughts that you might have where you want me to comment on. Happy to do that, because I think that's where, this is a base, and then we can go a little bit deeper depending on what you all want to talk about.
I have a question. Hi.
Sure.
Thanks
Hi.
for coming to talk to us. It's been really interesting so far. When you started talking about having different perspectives around and learning from that, what happens if someone that you need in order to continue and progress forward just keeps coming with this one idea that it's not really what you're about or not really what you're looking to do, but you need them in order to like continue moving forward? How does that play out in a business setting where you want to compromise, but at the same time you need to figure out how to make them happy and how to make yourself happy?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And that's not always super straightforward. So I think a lot of times, there's countless situations always where there isn't total agreement on direction forward, right? In something that you potentially might be working on. I think that when it comes to individuals that might have a very specific way of looking at something, and they're it's very hard to get them to budge. You have to continually figure out how to sell your point, but keep them along for the ride and really come up with that compromise to your point that you were talking about. Um, that doesn't always happen, right? It's not always going to be the case where you're going to get someone to compromise with you. I mean, I think, ultimately people look for ways to get to a place where their concepts or their ideas that they feel really strongly about are integrated into whatever you're thinking simultaneously. So meshing the two, I think, does work most of the time from a compromise perspective. I think one of the most important things is, you know, not necessarily saying I agree with you, right? As the person that you might not agree with on a specific circumstance, but it's listening, and making it known to that person that you're hearing their side of what they're talking about, listening to their ideas, trying to talk it through, and integrate some of that thinking, if appropriate, into what your concepts are, or your ideas are, or your direction is. And again, most of the time, someone with, from that perspective, even if they are being, a little difficult with it, really just wants to make sure that they're being heard, and listened to. And from that standpoint, the compromise usually works out. Now, again, there are situations where, probably, and they happen, I think, in a rarer circumstance, but there are situations where someone just is going to be stubborn and not going to listen to anyone else's ideas. And in that circumstance, I think obviously those are specific scenarios, one-offs in terms of how you handle that. But generally speaking, at least in my career so far and in my interactions with people that work for me, people that I've worked for, people where I've sat on boards or advised or vice versa, it's mostly about hearing the other person out and listening and coming up with, if they feel very strongly about their point of view, it's about coming up with some kind of compromise. And frankly, a lot of times, if I disagree with someone, and they feel very strongly about their point of view, I really do take a step back and think about it again, because a lot of times there's pieces of that might be very relevant if somebody is very much thinking like, this is really important and you should really be thinking about this. So I think it's an evolution kind of process. I think you take it kind of step by step, but generally speaking, listen, reiterate that you're listening, try and incorporate some of the things into your thinking, and really kind of take a step back and think about some of the stuff that you might want to incorporate, or maybe some of the stuff that might actually be very relatively helpful or relevant to this specific circumstance for yourself and your thinking. And then you go from there. But again, like I said, there are circumstances where, there are, hurdles that you can't get over. And in those specific circumstances, you obviously just have to figure out how to move forward in a different kind of way. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Great.
Related to that question, but also flipped, I was wondering, have you ever had an idea that you were passionate about, and how did you let it go? Like, what advice do you have for someone who may be in that situation?
So let me make sure I understand correctly. So had an idea where I was working with someone or talking to someone that didn't think it was a good idea, or was really against what I was doing.
Yes.
And wanted to do it a different way. Yeah.
Right.
So that happens all the time. I can't claim that all my ideas are good, although sometimes I like to think I can claim that, but I can't. And so, a lot of times, I have that happen all the time with my team. I mean, my team, I'm very open with my team. And, I like when they push back on me in a lot of ways. I think it's very important to have that kind of pushback. If I feel extremely strongly about something, I will, and there's a lot of people, that feel extremely strongly the other way. I will take a step back and think about it substantially. And again, sort of do the process that I was just talking about. Am I thinking about this correctly? Who else can I go talk to about this and get their opinions? Is there somebody with a external perspective that might be helpful? Someone who is totally outside of this conversation, who can give me, a very clear idea of, their thinking from a non-biased perspective. But yeah, there's plenty of times where I've had ideas where, again, like my partner in this business is my brother. And so we have disagreements all the time on certain things, from the standpoint of, we're business partners, but we're also brothers. And so, we've learned to kind of go through that process that I talked about before of listening, stepping back, compromising, coming back to the table, really thinking about, like, does this make sense or does this not make sense? But there's been plenty of times for me specifically that I have been very adamant about an idea, and I've been convinced otherwise, that it is not the route to go. And, over multiple different conversations. And then, my mind is changed by listening to other people, their thought processes, their rationale, as well as, sometimes specific data around, why something is working a specific way. And so I think, again, and I haven't talked too much about this particular word, but I think it's also really important in this entrepreneurial thinking kind of context, is being flexible, and having a flexible mind when it comes to stuff, and being able to, obviously, you should take your ideas, and if they're your ideas and you feel very strongly about them, you should advocate for them. But also, being flexible from the standpoint of, maybe this doesn't make sense in the way that I thought it made sense. And maybe we should be doing something a little bit different. And maybe someone else has a different perspective on it that makes more sense for right now, or for good, right? For this particular, project or scenario or whatever it may be. So I think it's having that flexible mindset and listening and making sure that you're not so stuck on your own ideas, just because they were your ideas or your concepts. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Mike, do you have an advisory board?
Yes. So we have quite a few advisors to the company and to me and myself personally. They, are people that I have known and trusted over, my career thus far. There are also people that have very different backgrounds than I do. And can bring different ideas to the table, different concepts to the table, that are definitely not afraid to push back on me in terms of things that I'm thinking about, which I really like, and it is very helpful for me. And so, it's I find it extremely important for myself to have that kind of feedback mechanism from advisors that are close to the business and close to myself. I have sort of a business advisory board for our business, very formally and specifically. And then I also have, for myself, my own personal kind of advisory board, which I also recommend to everybody. I think that, everybody should be thinking about that and building that over time, where you have people that you trust that you can talk to very openly about certain things from a business and personal standpoint that can help you think things through. So, I think both of those things are very important. And, even from a personal standpoint, I mean, personal, not just for like, your personal life, right? But personally from a professional standpoint, like, am I thinking about this from a career perspective in the appropriate way? Like, bringing a different perspective in, from that standpoint is very helpful, and an unbiased kind of perspective on that. So I would recommend to everyone, it's kind of like having, mentors around you, right? Or people that are close to you that can help guide you through your career. No matter what stage you are at in terms of your career, I find that to be extremely helpful. And I know a lot of, people who are very, very senior in very large corporations and companies that also have their own personal people that they go to get advice from. If you're not going to get advice from people and listen and trying to learn from other people at any stage in your career, you're definitely doing something wrong.
So I've got a question. Oh, do you want to go?
No, I'll go after.
All right. So I was going to ask more so on the entrepreneurial standpoint of what is your more so mindset or best recommendation for when you're trying to test an idea and you don't really want to expose that idea to the public without it being the final product, yet still finding a way to see if that's going to work or if it's something even worth exploring?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I think the easiest and best way to, test ideas is to get it in front of people, right? And so, depending on what it is, sometimes that's easier done than not, right? If you have a product or you have a service that's built out, even in a very, early stage format, getting people to try it and test it and play around with it is easier than if you just have an idea that you're trying to, put out there to the world. Because frankly, if you have an idea and you're talking to people about it, there a lot of people are just going to say, yeah, that's great. But until you actually see someone interact with something in whatever which way possible, you don't really know how they feel about it. I think from an idea perspective and a prototype or concept perspective, it's important to get unbiased feedback, right? You shouldn't be going to your mom or your sister or your best friend or whatever it may be, right? You should be going and figuring out how can I go talk to random people, or how can I get this in front of people that actually would be my customer that don't know me personally, and get unbiased feedback around it. Because frankly, a lot of times that helps you refine your concept and refine your idea, and get it to a place that makes it better, right? Even if you hear negative feedback on it, that's sort of a good thing. If you hear all positive feedback, again, there's something wrong. You're not asking the right people. I still get negative feedback on what we're doing, all the time. And I appreciate that, because, it helps us refine our product and helps us make it better, and, make it more useful for more people. And so, I obviously like hearing that people are enjoying our product too, right? But at the same time, I also am okay with people giving, that negative feedback. And so that's sort of what I would recommend from that standpoint. From putting it out to the public without it being ready, I have mixed feelings on that, right? I think you want it ready enough so that you can get real feedback, and have someone really play with what you're doing so you can really understand and learn from it. But you don't want to, just put something out there that really isn't going to get you that information. So I think you have to have a clear direction on what feedback looks like from the standpoint of putting a concept or idea out there. But I wouldn't hesitate to put something out there early, right? Before it's ready, before it looks pretty, whatever it may be. You want to learn just from interactions to start. I mean, you can always continue to build and make it better and make it better. But putting something out there earlier is better than not putting something out there at all, because you'll get more information. And the more information you get, the better off you're going to be in terms of continually, adding on and iterating your product or service or whatever you're building.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So I have a question as well. This goes back to more of when you're talking about the hiring process. One of the core values you look for in candidates is problem solving, and make sure that they have that skill and they can hone on that. In the opposite standpoint, as someone who is interviewing, how do you express that? How's the best way to demonstrate it without, if they ask, what are your core strengths? What do you, value most of? I feel like personally, it might seem a little base and bland to say, oh, I'm a great problem solver. How's a good way to demonstrate that without being so straightforward that they might not take that so seriously?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I don't think saying you're a good problem solver is necessarily the way to do that in an interview, right?
Yeah, I agree.
right?
Mhm.
It's, and I don't think putting that on your resume makes any sense either. It's about, it's about demonstrating that like through,
Mhm.
conversations, right? And like
Okay.
how you think about things. And so, a lot of times through interviews, like you're going to get questions about like, okay, like how, obviously you're interested in applying for our company or our business or what we're doing or whatever it may be, tell us why,
Mhm.
right? And then tell us what, potentially like additional things you're thinking about that might be creative, that might be something that you could solve for the business, right? For that particular
Okay.
circumstance. So it's integrating it in a natural way into an interview, and or an
Mhm.
email or a cover letter or whatever it may be. I mean, even if you're reaching out to somebody, from the perspective of potentially wanting a job, saying like, hey, I'm really interested in a position, here's why, et cetera, et cetera. Also, with your site, I think this is really cool, but I think you could do it better this way, blah, blah, blah. Here are some
Mhm.
ideas. That shows A,
Gotcha.
initiative, and B, like, an extra like interesting way of thinking, right? And it's like, okay, like this
Mhm.
person took the initiative to take an extra step there. Plus, they brought a cool idea to the table. So, right off the bat, that says, oh, wow, like you've already differentiated yourself from somebody else, right? And so I think there's ways to integrate from that standpoint.
Mhm.
It can be case by case depending on the scenario, but I think there's a lot of ways to kind of integrate problem solving and creativity and the kind of thinking into the conversation or into the interview process, in a way
Mhm.
that's not so, I'm a good problem solver.
Okay. Thank you so much. I
Quick
appreciate it.
question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have a quick question. So, when it comes to like thinking about new products and ideas, I think a big thing a lot of people always say is, look for a problem and then go from there. To me, at least, that's just like so much easier said than done.
I'm having a hard time hearing. Can you try and speak into the speaker a little bit more?
Yeah.
It's a little fuzzy. Or
I
type the
was,
question into the box.
yeah, there you go.
That'd probably be easier. These are all really good questions.
I think if you disconnect from the AirPods, you'll be able to speak fine without it.
Can you hear me now?
Much better.
My bad. All right.
Problem solver.
Thank you. Easier than
There you go. Exactly.
typing it all in. So my question is, when it comes to thinking of new products to create, new ideas to come up with, I think the biggest thing I always hear is like think of a problem and then go from there. And to me, that's obviously much easier said than done. So what's like your personal advice on how to come up with that, list of 100 new ideas, and stuff like that?
Yeah. So I think, there's obviously a lot of ways to come up with like new ideas for things that you might want to build or create or help integrate into an existing like company that you're working for. I think almost all the time, to your point before, I think most ideas, really great ideas, come out of problems, right? Or they come out of, a pain point in some scenario. Like you're working for, a company and you're doing something that is taking way too long for what it is, right? Why is this taking, and then you start asking questions, right? Why does this take too long? Why is this process like this? Could it be done better? What is a process or a technology or, whatever it may be that you can add to this that would be valuable to someone in your position doing it, or a customer, like, from an example of, would this be something someone would really want to use? And I think it always comes from like, is there a pain point? Is there a problem? If so, let's ask a lot of questions about it, and see where that leads, right? And then you get to a point from a business standpoint, like, is this something that somebody would, actually really want? Is this something that someone would actually pay for? et cetera, et cetera. But it always comes from a problem type solution relationship in terms of, figuring out what what are some really good ideas from the early stage. You can also, look, you can also think of really good ideas just like hanging out, right? And like daydreaming and, but usually even in that sense, I think, a lot of times when you come up with an idea, it comes from like some kind of frustration or some kind of problem that exists in the world and or that exists for you specifically that you want to solve.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Or a passion.
Or a passion.
A problem or possibly a passion that'll take you to that next level.
Yeah, and I think passion is also a super important point to be made. I think even with passion, though, there has to be a problem that you're solving with that passion in order to pursue it. In order to pursuing it at the next level, I think, like, look, if you have a passion for sports or music or a specific area, that's an extra thing on top. That's awesome, right? You can say, I want to work in this particular area or this particular thing, but you're still going to sort of need to find that pain point of what's going to solve somebody's problem after that. So I agree with you. I think, like, if you can combine passion and problem solving, there's nothing better, right? I've sort of done that for myself with this business, with the passion for sports and technology and media. But we also found a pain point and a problem with that. I wouldn't be in this area if there wasn't a problem, because we wouldn't be able to create, a business and a service that people actually want. But if you can combine the two, there's nothing better than that, given the fact that, passion is going to drive you to work that much harder and do that much more to, solve those problems and be in that space.
I was gonna kind of play off of that as well with Rookie Road. Can you talk a little bit about concept to creation, a little bit how it got started and where you are now, even the good, the bad, the ugly in between?
Yeah. No, it's definitely been a really cool process. So actually, from the story perspective, my brother actually started the business. And actually started as a project while he was a student, like his own personal project. And so it's probably relatively relatable to a lot of you and some of you who actually want to start companies. He went to University of Michigan. He was a computer science engineering major there. And he went there for that reason. He obviously went there because it's a really fun, great school too. But he didn't realize until he got there how big of a sports school it was, like really how big of like a sports school it was, like kind of like Syracuse, but maybe even more than Syracuse in some ways, at least from a football perspective. When he got there, he started really trying to integrate into that part of the community without really knowing a lot about the sport of football, right? Besides the fact, like, he grew up in the United States, so he obviously knows like what a touchdown was and what the Super Bowl was, like the big things, right? But he didn't know all the player positions, the penalties, like, the specifics of like what would make someone a football fan. And so from that standpoint, he started trying to teach himself the sport and, came into a lot of roadblocks, a lot of pain points in terms of like actually getting quality, reliable, content. And so, long story short, after a long period of time, he was like, this was not a fun experience. I want to create content that will help other people learn, sports, starting with football. And so, he started building his own, technology platform, started creating his own content. One thing led to another. And, he called me as older brother who's, in startup world and, made me older brother advisor for a while. And I was helping him, from a very early stage, just think through a lot of different problems and solve different issues and think through, a lot of different pieces of the puzzle that he didn't have experience necessarily with at the time. He ended up, taking a leave from school to work on it full time. Ended up, after I was entrepreneur in residence at Newhouse, recruiting me on board to run the business. He's an engineer, so he likes to build things and create things from that standpoint. He also was very self-aware that, he needed somebody with a complementary skill set from the business side of things. And so he recruited me on board, and we, relocated the company very early on out to Portland, Oregon, which is where we're headquartered now. Given the city is a great technology community, it's got a great, creative ecosystem. There's a lot of big sports companies there that made a lot of sense for us to be around, like Nike's headquartered there, Adidas North America. So we moved the company out to Portland, and we've really been growing ever since. And the mission and the core mission has remained the same since day one, is, help people learn and teach people about sports and get people the right quality information. I think the scope of it has definitely changed from, we want to, build something that encompasses all sports globally around the world, where, in the beginning, it started as football, right? But I think we've always had, and since my brother's, kind of inception of this, some core principles, some core, values that have not changed whatsoever in terms of what we're doing. But obviously the product has changed and iterated over, a long period of time to get us where we are today. And having that sort of, again, going back to the, earlier conversation, having that flexibility, that flexible mindset with certain things, while keeping, core to, what you're trying to build. And I think that combines the passion and problem solving as well, right? We have a passion for, building really good quality, reliable, amazing content. But we also needed the flexibility to continue to solve problems on top of that as we continue to grow the business. And so that's a little bit, of the high level of the story. I won't go into, every little detail of it. But it's been a really fun journey so far, and we got a lot more to do.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have one last question, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
So starting your own venture, going in with your brother, taking this leap, were you afraid? Failure, taking risks, those are real things. Yeah. How did you kind of talk yourself up and pump yourself up to do this?
Yeah, no, that's also a really good question. I think, like I said before, I've always really just liked and loved building things. And so from that standpoint, I always kind of knew for myself that I wanted to go down that route and build things from a company perspective. I think you learn over time, kind of the resilience part of it as well. I mean, it's not all roses for sure. There's a lot of hard parts about building a business and creating, a product, and it's a journey for sure. So it is scary. It's always scary. I think it's always scary when you also put something out there that you believe in a tremendous amount, that you start getting feedback on. And you start, wanting other people to believe in as much as you do. And I think there's it's never a purely like, not scary part of the process. But I think it's also, really exciting, right? You have these parallels going at the same time. You have this is a scary thing, but it's also really exciting because I get to like create something and build something that people are going to use and interact with. And I think that for me, at least, always the excitement part of it always outweighed the scary. The scary part, look, there's a lot of unknowns when you're creating something, on all fronts. But generally speaking, I always said, what's the worst that happens, right? Like, and I think you have to think about it that way too. The worst that happens is, it doesn't work, or someone doesn't like it, or whatever it may be. That doesn't really change anything from the standpoint of someone who's putting something out there or building something. Yeah, you probably grow a thicker skin by building a business and creating products and putting it out there, just from like the feedback mechanisms and the loop and in terms of that. But once you kind of get over that point, you look and you think like, okay, again, like what is the worst that can happen? Okay, this thing doesn't work and I'll do something else, or I'll do something new, or I'll create something new. And once you kind of get in that mindset, the scariness kind of dissipates a little bit. And, it never goes away completely, but it definitely becomes smaller and smaller and smaller over time. when you think about it that way.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Great.
So,
Oh, go ahead.
because of the timing of everything with COVID and how it has affected the sports world, how have you guys handled that situation? Because it's a real unknown. Nobody planned for this.
Yeah, no, definitely nobody planned for it. I think it was definitely, again, sort of one of those unknown, scary situations, and still is in a lot of ways. But I think, we're doing everything we can that's within our control, right? And I think you have to kind of get to the point, at least from growing a business standpoint, that you do everything that is within your specific control, and what's within our control, we're very focused on. And we believe that we can really continue to grow and build through it in a very different kind of way than we were doing, 4 or 5 months ago, right? Our strategy from 4 or 5 months ago is very different than it is right now, given the fact that, this totally, kind of shifted everything from a sports landscape, to your specific point. And in reality, a total economic landscape, and for every industry out there. I think we are very lucky. We actually operated almost completely virtually and remotely prior to this. So we had very little disruption from that standpoint. But we definitely, from a sports being on hold and just the general economic standpoint, there were a lot of things we were planning on doing that just weren't in the cards anymore. And so we, took a step back, and it kind of goes back to that flexibility mentality. We took a step back. We did a lot of brainstorming, a lot of thinking, a lot of, what do we do in the short term? What do we do in the long term to make sure that we, mitigate risk and make sure that we can keep our team together and make sure that we're, in a good place, coming out of this and being able to get through it. And so, we did a lot of strategy sessions, and I think that, to your point, we're definitely impacted. I think everybody is impacted from a business standpoint. And so, we took it, and are taking it very seriously from that standpoint. But we've also come up with some, very good plans, I think, for mitigating risk and, really making sure that we can move forward through this in the best way possible. So it's definitely been hard, for sure. But again, I think it's been much harder for a lot of other organizations and companies out there. And we feel very fortunate to be in the position that we're in. But generally speaking, it's been hard, but we're in a decent place, and we're going to push through it. And sports will come back. They will come back bigger than ever, in my opinion, when they're able to do so. Maybe without fans to start. Who knows? That's what I'm hearing. But generally, we I think as a society in general, I think we'll get through it. I think you hang on to what you can control. And as more stuff comes out, more information comes out, more things get sorted out from a health perspective and an economic perspective. We'll probably, not just us, but just generally speaking, be in a really good place coming out of this. I'm optimistic about it. Again, it might take a little bit longer than everybody wants. But at the same time, I think, in time, everything will end up being in a really good place.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. This was very helpful, very insightful. I really appreciate you doing this for us.
Yeah, of course. It's a pleasure. And you all asked, really amazing questions. I really enjoyed this. Happy to do it again at some point. So just let me know when. And yeah, everybody, stay positive. Obviously this is a difficult time, I think, for everybody, like I was saying before, both business and individually. But I think, like I said, I think everyone's gonna, get through this. It might, depend. I think the timing is the question mark, but eventually we will get through this. And I think, just stay healthy and safe and do things that you enjoy. And it's a difficult time, but I think it's a good time also to just reflect and plan and create. And one thing I will say about entrepreneurs specifically is, and building companies, some of the, biggest companies come out of, problem solving in these kind of circumstances as well. And so a lot of these, moments in time, as difficult as they are and as horrible as they are, there's a lot of really positive things that can come out of them. And a lot of times those things come out of, people that have ideas and people that have, ways to solve problems that weren't thought about before, whether it's, working remote or whether it's, healthcare related with, treatments or vaccines or process stuff or new technologies or whatever it may be. There's a lot of positives that can ultimately come out of situations like this. So, again, I think, for all of you, thinking that way can be, very valuable as an individual going into going through this and then coming out of it, but also from things that you can do and create that could be really helpful for general society.
Thank you
so much.
Thanks, everybody. And
Thank
feel
you
free
so
to,
much.
feel free to reach out. If you have any other additional questions or thoughts, I mean, you can find me on, LinkedIn or any social media stuff. And,
Whitman Connect.
I'm pretty accessible, so feel free to reach out.
Mike is on Whitman Connect, everyone.
And Whitman Connect, yes.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Of course.
Thanks,
Talk to you
Mike.
all soon.
Thank you.
Take care. Be well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.